Well, welcome. Tonight, we're going to talk about a moment that every parent dreams about and then dreads. It's when do I apply to college? How do I apply to college? What college do we apply to? And we've got a person that came down from College of the Holy Cross and a parent and a son of someone who wants to apply to Holy Cross. So why don't we start with introductions?
So my name is Brandon Gomez, and I'm one of the admissions counselors at Holy Cross. I've been there now officially that it's September, a full year as an admissions counselor, but I technically will be going on my 6th year at the college, as it were, since I just graduated in 2014. And my travel territories, I go to Chicago, as well as Boston, Brooklyn, Bronx, Queens, Staten Island, just part of the traveling and recruiting students and trying to find strong applicants.
I'm Andrew Duchemin. I'm from Haverhill, Massachusetts. I'm going to be a senior this year in high school. I go to Central Catholic in Lawrence. I play football and track, and I'm a student ambassador, and I'm getting excited for the college process.
My name is Jeff Duchemin. I'm Drew's dad, and it's been an exciting summer. We've toured all over the East Coast looking at colleges, so it's coming into a very busy time of the year. Holy Cross is definitely a college that we're excited to go through the application process. I'm a local guy, I guess. I work for a company called Harvard Bioscience, which is based in Holliston, Massachusetts. So I'm familiar with the Milford area and glad to be here. Thanks for having us in, Al.
The biggest question, what kind of college? As I start out, I remember my daughters, who you graduated with, my Emily, she never applied to anywhere but Holy Cross. But my oldest started out College of Pluto, University of Mars. How far can I get away? So, first question was, where do you want to go to school, local or away? Then it seemed to be big school, small school. Is that about the first two questions you have to ask yourself, Drew?
Yeah, definitely. For me, all my friends and me are different, but I think for me it's like a good size population, not too big, and then the area, the location. I would go far away if I could, but I would stay home. It just depends, I guess.
What do you run into, Brandon, when people come and they say, why Holy Cross?
So as to why I chose Holy Cross, or why should they go to Holy Cross?
Either
Both. One. So, the points that we always touch on, and it's funny that you say that those are the two big questions that students will ask themselves first, because those are two of the things that we'll mention first in an information session, that we are a small college. We are an intimate sort of community with 10-to-1 faculty to student ratio, and we do emphasize that we are small. And then, where we are, we'll talk about Worcester, we'll talk about Massachusetts, we'll talk about, our proximity to two other major cities, Boston and Providence. So those are some of the things that I think students are definitely asking themselves, and hopefully, if they're looking small, they'll consider Holy Cross. If they're looking for what Holy Cross is, that's what they'll find. For myself, I was very much tossed into the college process. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I wanted to maintain some sort of small environment, something in New England. Strong alumni, which, I don't have to tell you about. So that was something that I think students are looking for, not just somewhere to go for 4 years, but somewhere to then continue after 4 years, nurturing a relationship with the college, university they go to, and also that college, university giving them options after Holy Cross, whatever college they choose.
Now, what makes you choose a small school versus a large school, Drew?
For me, I would like to, if I'm in the classroom, I don't want to be in a big lecture class of 200 students. I want the teachers and me to have a connection, and then you would know everyone, I feel like, in your classes more, and I like that better than just a big, huge class.
I remember my darling bride went to Penn State, and she was very comfortable in lecture halls of 300-400, and I tried explaining to her that most of my senior level courses were 6. We had classes in chemistry of 4. Good news was, boy, did you learn.
Yeah.
Bad news was you couldn't skate. It's not like you're gonna, if there's 250 in front of you, you can probably blend in. When there's 3 next to you, or 4, you really had to be prepared. Jeff, as a parent, what's the first thing comes to mind when your son is picking a school?
Well, I think, the education portion of it is so important. Walking away with a 4-year degree, feeling comfortable that you'll be able to compete in the world today. It's so competitive. And I think one of the things Holy Cross brings to the table is the networking. You know, the graduates are well connected. I'm a state school graduate. And I think one of the difference, and I spoke to some freshmen recently at University of Massachusetts Dartmouth about this. Networking is so important. In having the ability to connect with people who maybe went to your university that you can reach out to and learn from, and possibly get mentors to help you decide where you want to go with your career. I think that's something that Holy Cross brings to the table. The fact that the classrooms are smaller, the students get to know one another, the students get to know the faculty is so important. Sitting in a lecture hall with 700 to 1,000 people. I was out at Ohio State about 3 weeks ago. I spoke to a student out there. A lecture hall of 600 to 1,000 people is just, I just don't know if, personally, I would be able to connect that way. I'm not sure if Drew would, but I think a smaller classroom would be very helpful.
There's also the question of, do I like to be in the city? You look at a Northeastern, a BU, really no campus. I mean, at Holy Cross, I think you knew everybody more or less on campus. There's 2,800?
Yep, to about 2,900 now. I would always sort of call it the Holy Cross 1 degree of separation. If you didn't know someone, you knew someone that knew them. Which, I mean, it's nice to have that familiarity, like you said, with the students on campus. But even now, visiting high schools and bumping into other alums, they'll say, "Oh, did you happen to know, so and so?" And I can still say, maybe if I saw their face, but I didn't have direct interaction with them. So it's sort of that happy medium size that you do know people, especially within your department and your activities, athletics, whatever it might be. But you don't feel overwhelmed by familiar faces.
Well, when you think about it, as you look back, Holy Cross alumni are called fanatics.
Bleed purple.
Bleed purple. Absolutely. I mean, I'll never forget when my daughter was applying, my oldest, my darling bride looked at her and said, "If you go to Holy Cross, I will support you, but I will not be a Holy Cross mother." And I was like, "What's that?" She goes, "Look at them, Albert. They're all in purple. Everything they have is, even, the parents."
Even things you don't need in purple.
In purple. Yes. And now I look at my wife, more purple than we'll ever have. And, it's nice because I got started in the analytical instrument field through an alumni connection. And when I look at, you remember Devin Brown, captain of the basketball team, he went down to GE Financial, very purple, and different places. And we just got to know him. He's a student. And I remember on his way down to his interview, he was nervous, so we spent an hour and a half, because that was the distance to where he was going, on the phone. Back then, the minutes counted, so I called him, just practicing. And when he got there, he said it was the friendliest environment. There were all sorts of purple people everywhere, and everybody wants to help. And like you say, I mean, it's so critical, because most of the time it's just getting in the door, When you look at a student, tell us, because there's this mystery of
There
how
is.
you pick, the sacred 13 people.
Yep.
How do they behave?
Yep, the jury of 13. And I think that, and I always say that I feel like the admissions counselor sometimes gets this image of, dark room, light, the bulb is flashing, big rejection red stamp and an ink pad, and there's 3 piles, yes, no, maybe. The process isn't that intimidating, especially at Holy Cross. So, the 3 big things we're looking at, first we turn to a student's transcript. You have to make sure that a student can do the academics at the college, and Holy Cross definitely has strong and rigorous academics across the board, because we are liberal arts. So a student's gonna, they have to know how to write, even if they're gonna be a math major. So we need that sort of liberal arts foundation. And so looking at academics, seeing that they're taking advanced classes, not just that they have A's, but also, that they're taking advanced courses. So whatever that means at the high school, APs, honors, IB curriculum. Holy Cross is great in that it looks at the context of the high school that a student's applying from. So if Sally's offered 2 APs in Connecticut and she took 2 APs, and then John from Florida is offered 15 APs and took 10, those are both strong students because they're taking close to, if not all, of the program that's allowed to them. So those are things we're looking at as far as academics go. Then we're just looking to get to know a student. That's why we always encourage students to interview. And I had the pleasure of doing your interview.
Yeah.
So we're really, where interviews are optional at Holy Cross, some colleges will make them mandatory. Some colleges, will only request that certain students interview. So we just want that demonstrated interest, that sort of, Holy Cross is the place that I want to be.
How important is the family of the student?
I think, we definitely incorporate the family into the process because we do know that, while the student, it is ultimately their decision where they want to go and that it's the right fit for them, that it's important that the family also feels comfortable that their child, niece, nephew, whomever it might be, is making the right choice. So even with the interview process, we always invite the parent in at the end and say, do you have any questions about Holy Cross, the college application process, anything at all? And a lot of times, even for parents who have gone to college, the changes in the process, the common application, are still foreign. So it's important to keep the parents in the loop, and especially when it comes to sort of financial aid information and things like that, things are constantly changing. So we like to keep the parents as much a part of the process as the students as we can.
That's great.
So now, Jeff, as a parent, obviously, the best advice I was given was, don't get involved initially, as to what school to go to. And sure enough, the concentric circles kept getting narrower and narrower, with my daughter, where she started out California and then slowly moved in. But what are you looking for in a school for your son?
Well, I think, I touched on it a little while ago in terms of the ability to network, post-graduation. But I think a mid-sized school to a smaller school is what I'm looking for, only because I think Drew will get more out of it from an education standpoint. His focus is business, accounting, finance, possibly the future of investments or banking. We need to make sure that the curriculum at any given school will match those desires. Drew has an interest in traveling abroad. At 12 years old, he went over and spent, I think, 19 or 21 days in Europe. Lived with a German family, went to a German school with a German student. He caught the bug at an early age to travel, as you and I have, Al. So he wants to have the ability to do a year of international study, and Holy Cross is a phenomenal program. The one thing I really like about Holy Cross, I think it's different from some other schools that we've toured, and correct me if I'm wrong, freshman year, it's almost mandatory that you don't have a major.
Right, yep, so everyone will come into Holy Cross undeclared.
Undeclared, so it gives you a year to really understand and make sure the career direction that you're thinking in your head you want to follow is actually correct. So it gives the students a year to get their feet grounded and maybe grow up and mature a little bit, and then make a decision on which path they want to follow.
Well, I think the other thing that impressed me with your family was you want to get involved in the school. As a family, it's not just ship Drew off and we'll see you at Thanksgiving.
Absolutely.
That to me is something that, I loved it. You knew my Emily.
Yeah.
When she became a cheerleader, me, the world's worst sports watcher, signed up for men's basketball, women's basketball, men's, football, hockey.
Right.
Because it gave me an excuse to see her twice a week. I only got to see her 10 minutes before the game and after. But we were involved. We felt, even my wife, who didn't go to Holy Cross, she was always proud to put that P14, the parent of a 14, on, her tag. And I think that's another thing that a smaller school can do, is bring the whole family together.
Yeah, and families get to know each other and start to, create their own sort of network amongst, their children who are at the college. And tailgating is a huge way that the parents just love to, and I would remember this even, as a student, just bring in trays of pulled pork and potato salad, and there was nothing better than when a student would be walking from the post office with a care package from home around the holidays, and you always envied that student because everyone really does sort of have that support, whether it's from distance in just letters or sort of texts or calls every now and then, but parents definitely want to stay involved in the process even after a student's been accepted to Holy Cross.
Well, I remember my wife was all over me because every Saturday I used to mail a picture of Emily, an 8x10 that I'd find from the old archives. I'd go into the repository when she was 2 years old, 3 years old, and I'm mailing them to her. And Sharon's like, come on, this is corny. She's in college. Thanksgiving came. Since she was going to be home Wednesday, I didn't bother. She got home, she's like, where's my picture this week? So for 4 years, something as simple as mailing her a picture,
Right.
every week she knew she had one. And it kept me feeling better, like I was still involved. So you look at the academic ability of the student.
Right.
Then what happens?
So then, like I mentioned, interview is always the next most important thing, optional, but strongly encouraged. I always say it's the 3 I's: interview, interview, interview. And that's just, again, adding a third dimension to an otherwise two-dimensional process. I'm at home in the winter looking at a computer screen, and having that interview, having that visual connection really helps to get to know a student. Anything sort of after that, we would definitely focus in, as I said, on the college essay, looking that a student, again, has that creative flair, has that personality behind it. Don't necessarily approach the college essay as a research paper. We want you to grab us with that first sentence. Write about something you're passionate about and that we're going to enjoy reading because you enjoyed writing it. So the college essay is huge for us. Holy Cross, specifically, we're test optional. We definitely put more emphasis on a student's transcript and 4-year record, which is something that's more of an indicator of how a student will do at Holy Cross. Students can submit if they want to, but about half will choose not to. So that's something else that we look at, and I kind of touched on demonstrated interest. Coming for a tour, if a counselor's coming to your high school, going to that session, going to a college fair and walking up to the table and saying hello to Holy Cross, you're going to fill out the same information, but you're going to get credit for being at all those different events. And that for us just tells the admissions committee that this student really wants to be here. And early decision is sort of the ultimate of that demonstrated interest. It's saying, if you accept me to Holy Cross, I will come to Holy Cross because it is my absolute number one. But those are just, yeah.
So now when I apply, I've got early decision,
Yep, early decision.
early acceptance.
So the way Holy Cross is, we only have early decision, which is binding, and then regular decision, which is sort of the regular admissions date that students will submit their application, the typical March, whatever date, push the button, all the emails go out saying your decision's online. Some colleges and universities offer what's called early action, where a student can fill out their paperwork early. And then there's also some schools that offer a early decision 1 and then an early decision 2. But Holy Cross only has the one early decision date.
So now the early action or early acceptance, there's a myth that if you apply early, the colleges are less strict than when they start filling up their class. Is that?
So I would say the reality is that we're still looking for the same quality of student. It doesn't mean that we're going to say, oh, this person has C's, but they're in early decision, so therefore we're going to take them. I think what early decision does, that's a benefit to a student if it really is their number one choice, is that it identifies it as I said, that extreme demonstrated interest.
Gives you that extra little plus.
Yeah. And also it's a smaller pool. So when we're comparing or we're thinking about different students and we're going through applications, it's a smaller pool and a different pool of applicants that we're seeing than, say, the regular decision applicant pool, which is much larger. So when you think about it in that smaller context, a student might stand out more easily. It depends on what the student's interest is in the college.
Now, how many students apply? Is it like 6,300 for 700 spots, or?
Yeah, so we usually receive about those numbers exactly, and then we're looking to make a class of about 740 or so. In the president's address today, I believe he said the class is officially now at 738, with a couple that will be trickling in. So, yeah, and I mean, and of that, and of the class of 2019, about 45% of those students are early decision.
Really?
Yeah. So.
Wow.
So a large number of students that eventually end up deciding to come to Holy Cross after being accepted are early decision students.
So if you had one question to ask Brandon, what would it be? I mean, it's got to be frightening to sit there and say, okay, I'm going to apply. Here's the decision that could affect the rest of my life.
Um,
And knowing that I was up on that big intimidating screen at one point as an alum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
like any question, like,
Anything.
Anything to do.
about Holy Cross.
Well, when you're going to apply to a school,
Mm-hmm.
obviously I'm sitting there saying, okay, what can I do
Okay.
to better enhance? You know, that was my first question is, okay, what am I supposed to put in this application? You know, when Emily wrote her essay, oh God, she had so many questions. I said, honey, pick something you love. Talk about, as you say, the passion.
Yeah.
What do you have passion in? Let them know who you are. She says, well, what do I write about? Or, and I was like, oh God, here we go. So I'm just curious, you know, as a prospective student, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Like, do you think it's, if I'm like trying to get into college that's hard for me to get into, like Holy Cross for me would be a challenge to get into, you think it's smarter if I would do the early decision, even if my grades aren't A's, like all A's, or I'm not
So it's a reach school. You know,
Right.
Holy Cross would be a reach school. Are you better off doing early decision for a reach school, or?
So I would say because it's a smaller pool, like I said, you are sort of in a different context of students. So yeah, and I would always encourage early decision if it really was your number one. You know, not just because it's a reach school, not because it's, you know, sort of that middle of the layer. I probably will get accepted school. Early decision really is that commitment. So you have to make sure that you are ready to make that commitment. But I would definitely say that applying earlier shows that interest, and so we like to see that. And so therefore we would review your application again, looking for the same things, looking for students with strong academics. But that demonstrated interest would help a student's application.
The one thing I've gathered through this process is technology is incredible. You know, the statistics that they show at every school, it will tell you what the acceptance rate is for early decision or regular decision, and you can really understand, you know, what your chances are, whether it be a reach school, your middle tier, or lower school, in terms of how to apply. And there is some strategy behind it. You know.
Well, I remember that Holy Cross became a second choice to a lot of kids who were applying to the Harvards, the Ivy League schools. So I wonder if we don't suffer a little bit, less acceptance of our acceptance, because kids get into, their primary schools, maybe a Harvard or Brown, and we were the second choice.
The thing too is that when students are looking at Holy Cross, something that I think Holy Cross that's very unique to it, in addition to those academics, is that Jesuit mission. I mean, it's definitely something that we don't, hide about Holy Cross. So I think that in and of itself might change the applicant pool, because that's something that a student might be looking for. And yeah, I mean, going against other schools, I would sort of compare us to schools that were of a small liberal arts, still the academic rigor, perhaps in the New England area. Those are really the schools that students we're seeing are finding the difficulty, making the decision between, because, the schools that might be most similar to us are actually the ones that they're deciding between.
I mean, Father Phil will get mad at me, but the Jesuits are sneaky, because they sneak those values into you. When I talk to old alum, where they had to go to morning mass every day, and you had Jesuits living on the floor, I mean, it was ingrained in you. Did you ever feel it?
I actively searched it, so therefore I felt it. I feel like students and the Jesuit mission sort of transcends beyond, includes, the Catholic masses and going to that, but then also goes beyond that to, the general themes of social justice, of the idea of men and women for and with others. And so in that sense, I think students might be partaking in what is the Jesuit mission without actually knowing it. So in that sense, it might be a little bit more sneaky.
It snuck up on me, because freshman year, I'm not a big, I've got to go to mass every day, to wear, my religion on my sleeve. But somehow, by like sophomore year, Worcester Cares Day, all the things that Holy Cross sponsored, you got this feeling that, hey, I owe it. It wasn't them telling you, you must, but the Jesuit tradition just kind of permeated into you. And all of a sudden you wanted to go down and help people who weren't as fortunate in Worcester. You wanted to help different, causes. And I think that, to me, was probably the strongest statement about a Jesuit education, is they never forced it on me. But, to this day, we go down to the chapel for Easter, Mass in the round, and it's beautiful. We found ourselves going to Mass, not because anybody told us you have to, it's just what we did.
Right. And I think that's something from sort of day one, even the fact that you mentioned that students all come in undeclared. A huge thing is discernment and figuring out, who am I, who do I want to be for others, who do I want to be for the larger world. And I think that is something that is so ingrained from day one, because everyone is coming in undeclared. They're given the opportunity to do that reflection, to partake in that sort of inward, thinking and figuring out what do I want to do.
But so many of my friends weren't Catholic that were in the dorms with us. And that Jesuit set of values, you didn't have to be a staunch Catholic to buy on to the fact that, hey, we're kind of lucky. I've got a great family who's supporting me.
Right.
And I've been given a chance. I kind of owe. I think that's the alumni thing. When we go up for all the networking events, work on how many kids with their resumes, and even Dr. Chu with his entrepreneurial studies program. That was a month that a bunch of us would donate, going up there at night to work with young students, to teach them basic business ideas. I've been out of school 40 years, for crying out loud, and you still remember. I think one of the most profound statements about Holy Cross was when my daughter asked Frank Fellaccio, my old chemistry teacher, okay? She said, schools have changed so much. When I read about BC, when I read about other schools over the last 20, 30 years, they seem to have changed. She goes, how come what I'm seeing here is exactly what my father says he experienced? And Frank just point blank looked at her and said, because we know who we are. And we really like who we are. If you like these values, you'll love Holy Cross. If you don't want to come, because we're not going to change. It's evolved with technology, with everything, but I think the core values are the same probably for 100 years before me.
Yeah, and if anything, becomes stronger as the years go on. Yeah, and I know that the college is definitely sort of working to obviously different upgrades and buildings, athletic centers and arts centers and different focuses, but yeah, I think sort of those core values have always been there, and that's something else that I came to find out during the transition into an admissions counselor position, is that going to my first college fair, students would come up and they would say, do you have nursing? And no, we don't have a nursing program specifically. We have a pre-health program where you can pursue nursing after Holy Cross if you want to get that general liberal arts education. But if a student's looking to leave after 4 years with ready to go out and be a nurse, then Holy Cross isn't necessarily the right fit. Or X, Y, and Z examples of that. And so I think it's not only about finding, the best college, but finding the best college that's the fit for each student that we interact with. So even when a student walks up to me at a college fair and says, I'm looking for this program, do you have it? Do you have a criminal justice major? We don't have a criminal justice major, but let's see if we can find you a college here that does. So it's not just about, us wanting to find the best students for Holy Cross, but helping the students find the best colleges for them.
But, something like Emily wanted to do PR for the biotech industry. That's what her mother does. I've been involved in the biotech industry for a long time. So she started out the first 2 years just heavy in biochemistry, you know, Haberlin all over. Stayed down that side. And then the last 2 years, she moved over to the English sociology.
Right.
So she didn't walk out with a PR degree, but she graduated on Friday, Memorial Day was Monday, and she started work on Tuesday. You know, so there's a lot to be said for a good, solid education that you can apply. Now you're thinking of playing sports.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Is it scary?
No, I'm confident with it, I think. It'd be really fun. You'd meet all new people, and you get to travel all over like New England, and it would be awesome, I think.
See, I admire these student athletes, because at Holy Cross, they really are student athletes. You know, it absolutely made me ill years ago when our Secretary of Education was talking about some of the southern basketball schools, where he said, we ought to set a goal that at least a third of our athletes graduate. Can you imagine? You know, Jeff, if you set a goal as CEO that a third of your employees succeed at their job, and that would be your goal, something to aspire to. You know, it just stunned me when I see the load. I mean, we got to know a lot of the hockey players. They had the highest GPA of any team. But as far as I knew, we didn't get any special basket weaving 101 courses for them.
Right.
So you got to carry a full academic load.
Yeah.
And that's what's great about, you know, again, Holy Cross too, is that the athletes are very much integrated into the community. You don't feel as though, the best example in the story that I always give is, you know, you go to the football game, you go to the basketball game, women's ice hockey, you know, whatever the game might be, and you don't feel like you're cheering on number 25. You know, you're cheering on Amy from your religion class, you're cheering on John from your history class. These are students that you're interacting with throughout the day. So you don't feel like, you know, these athletes are on a pedestal, or that they are given that special treatment. They are very much part of the community. They're ingrained in the community. They still take classes and like you said, need to pass those classes.
It's amazing, because, you know, that's a full-time job. You know, if you're going to walk on and play football, I mean, that's 40 hours a week of football, and then you've got your normal class load. But isn't it about 25% of the kids are involved in some type of varsity sport?
Yes, yeah. And then, you know, outside of that, we have club, intramural, which was for people like me, who played soccer for the first time his senior year at Holy Cross. And because I have long arms and big hands, they shoved me in the goal and told me to block whatever came my way, so help me. But yeah, I mean, even, you know, for anybody that's been on the Holy Cross mountain, Mount St. James, it's somewhat of an athletic event just to walk around campus. So I would stretch it to say maybe 100% of students are involved in some activity, but yeah, realistically it's about 1 in every 4.
Any specific question as a parent that you'd want to ask an admission officer?
Drew's been in a Catholic school his entire life, grammar school, now high school. Does that play into the admission process? It's one thing we haven't talked about.
Yeah, so as far as Holy Cross is concerned, you know, a large number of students from Catholic high schools do end up applying to Holy Cross, be it the nature of the name, be it the nature of the Jesuits. But, you know, that familiarity there might help a student identify Holy Cross as one of their top choices. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely great to see students, you know, that already have that somewhat of that foundation. That being said, there are students who come from public schools, come from charter schools, you know, private schools that aren't necessarily religiously affiliated. So, you know, not everyone's coming from a Catholic school, but I think that we do tend to attract that type of student because of, as we talked about, the Jesuit values and just the nature of the college.
Financial aid is a huge factor for many people.
Yeah, yes, very much so.
I mean, I remember having a long discussion one night at dinner with Father McFarland, and I said, you know, you come from a liberal arts school. Do you think you can't have somebody edit your annual letter? And he looked at me and said, what's wrong? I said, you just said through a whole paragraph all the cost cutting and savings, and then that last sentence, it will only cost you $55,000 this year. I said, only in $55,000? really don't belong in the
Should not be
same
side by side.
Because to me, that is not an only.
Mm.
But, today, all the top private schools in New England are in the 60, right? How do people deal with it?
So for Holy Cross, we have somewhat of a strong position on the fact that we are a need-blind college. So what that means is that we do not look at a family's ability to afford Holy Cross when we're deciding whether or not to admit a student. We're making our decisions on those academic grades, on test scores if a student submits them, our interaction with a student. We're not going to say, you know what, you can't afford Holy Cross, and so therefore we can't accept you. So just hearing that
Or
in and
conversely,
of
you can
itself,
afford
right,
it.
and so therefore we will accept you.
If you
exactly.
pay full bore, we'll take a lower caliber.
Exactly.
student.
Yeah, exactly. So not having the finances in the equation when we as the counselors are making those decisions is not only a sort of a sigh of relief for ourselves, but certainly for parents that are concerned as to whether or not that will be a factor. The other sort of flip side to that, and comparing it, is that we are also meet 100% of demonstrated need. So when a family fills out FAFSA, CSS profile, non-custodial parent forms, whatever forms they need to fill out, Holy Cross guarantees to meet 100% of a family's need through scholarships, grants, alumni donations, some loans which a student can choose to accept, outside scholarships, things like that. So those two things separately in and of themselves are great, but when you put them together, it helps students and parents really appreciate how financial aid works at Holy Cross.
How many kids get true financial aid?
So about 2/3 of the students on campus are receiving financial aid in some level. So it's not like there's a small sect of students who are receiving full scholarship and then everybody else is full pay. 2/3 are receiving it at some varying level, whether it's full tuition or partial.
Now, when you look, there's always the myth.
Mm-hmm.
Drew comes from Massachusetts. Well, it's going to be harder for him to get in than, Drew Duchemin of South Dakota. Fact or fiction?
So we definitely like to sort of see students from different geographic locations applying. Having traveled out to the Chicago area and recruiting students from there. Again, I think sort of the answer is at the heart of the question, which is that we're still looking for the same quality caliber student, whether they're coming from Massachusetts or whether they're coming from, as you said, South Dakota or Colorado.
But you're not going to put a limit on saying, okay, we've already accepted X people from Massachusetts,
and
no
that's,
more.
Right, and that's the other thing that a lot of parents will be concerned about, especially if their student comes from a high school where Holy Cross sees a lot of applications. Chaminade out on Long Island, we see tons
St.
of
John's.
applications from there. Yeah, St. Ignatius and Loyola Academy out in Chicago are two schools that I visit that are both Jesuit, and we see a lot of applications from, and so parents are concerned, if 25 students apply, do you only take 5 of them? But if 25 students apply and 25 students are qualified to be at Holy Cross, 25 students are going to have the option to choose to come to Holy Cross. So we're not, filling quotas, as I think a lot of people
Well, everybody's
might
worried
think.
about that.
Yeah.
That, okay, there's going to be so many people applying from Central Mass, or Eastern Mass, that my chances are much lower.
Right.
It'd be nice to have, I don't know, how many states do we have?
A good number. So the states that I would mention that always sometimes shocks people is that we do get a large number of students from the Minnesota area. I say large, but for the areas. Minnesota, Wisconsin, we had even students from my class that are from out in the Colorado area. A good number of students stretching California. And this year, we actually accepted a large number of international students, which is sort of a population that is definitely growing. Students not only from mainland China, we had one from Hong Kong, but also South America, Europe, Africa, different places.
So now, if you go to Holy Cross, you're close to home.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think there's benefits, and then I think there's positives and negatives to it. Like it'd be awesome to come home every once in a while, see my family. I would love that. See my brother play in sports, and but then you also want to get away and be independent and do your own thing. So I think it's pretty good. Perfect location, I guess. because you're not too close.
Yeah, it seemed like, Holy Cross from Emily, she was far enough 20 miles away that we're not going to drop in unannounced. But, she did stay true to her word. She thought her mission, one of her key missions at Holy Cross, was to guard the bottle of evil spirits that we gave her. It said Tide on it. So she kept saying she knew there were evil spirits in that Tide bottle and that she should never open it and let them out. So she got used to the fact that she had 2 laundry baskets, a Gazinta and a Gazauta. So whenever I went up, I got handed one and handed her back the other. And of course, her rationale was she didn't mind doing laundry, but Grandma always ironed everything. So she liked getting back all of her clothes.
Nicely pressed.
Nicely.
And, yeah.
But it was tough. A lot of the big holidays, when you had 3 or 4 days, if you came from California, just physically there wasn't enough time to get home. We always had second Thanksgiving at our house because all the kids from campus that never made it home somehow all got in cars and showed up at our house for Thanksgiving. So, it was kind of nice to be able to give them a little bit of home cooking. But again, it was far enough away that she was on her own.
Right.
Any idea economics?
Yeah.
What else gets you excited?
I love traveling, so business, like if I did studying abroad, I think taking a business in a different city somewhere else in the world would be really cool, and I'd probably major in finance or accounting, economics. I'm not sure yet though.
It must be hard. I considered junior year abroad, but I didn't want to leave Mount St. James.
So, I went. I did. I made the decision.
Did you?
Yeah, as a student, I decided to go abroad for my junior year, and was a fantastic decision on my part. I think I wouldn't have traded that year for anything because you really are expanding onto that global market that you just talked about. You're meeting people from France, from England, from Italy. I went to York, England for the year, so I didn't have that language barrier, albeit sometimes I felt like I did. So that was just the experience that I had as a student.
I think it's different. I think it's different today from when we were in school. There's a higher percentage. I'm not sure what the percentage is at Holy Cross, but some of these schools, 70% of the students travel abroad for whether it's 1 semester or a full year. It's incredible. I'm not sure.
And
what
I can say at Holy Cross, yeah. So my year, about a third of the student of the junior class rather went abroad. Now this class that's going abroad this year, I honestly think it's up in the high 30 to even possibly 40% of the junior class is going abroad.
It's incredible.
As the programs become more popular, and it was something that was sort of advertised to me as you have your interview after you graduate, and someone sees you spent a year in a foreign country. You could easily spend 15, 20 minutes talking about your year and that experience and the transition, and then you come back to Holy Cross and things have changed, but the people are still there, and you yourself have changed. But what's nice is that you can really appreciate Holy Cross at that point, or where you are. For myself, it was the transition between going to a small liberal arts to a large university abroad. Having that 250 lecture hall experience made me appreciate the 8-person, you better do the reading type class. So.
Drew, would you do an English-speaking country, or you think you'd want to try a different language?
Yeah, definitely. I like Europe, so I would go to Italy or France, Germany, even if it's a different language, like not English. I would definitely try that.
That must be double hard. Trying to learn. You had a semi-foreign language,
True.
British.
True.
But, going to Germany or France, when we lived in France, we got to a point where we could speak French well enough that if we were outside of Paris, they would accept us. Parisians would never accept us, no matter what. They always
Unless
made
you had the
fun.
right accent.
I never could. Never could master a Parisian accent, so we always got made fun of. But it just amazes me to go learn, in a second language. But again, I'm too old. When I was a kid, English is my second language. So you got used to it. We didn't know there was this language, English, till we got to school and said, what are all these people talking? Because at home it was always Portuguese. In the neighborhood, at the Heights, it was always Portuguese. was only when you went out, all of a sudden you realize they're speaking funny words. But I just imagine.
But as a parent, I think, you know, learning different cultures, diversity is so important, because that's what you're going to see in once you get out into business, and once you get into a work environment, you're going to see diversity. You're going to see different cultures. You really have to be able to adapt to working with a different group of people. And so I think traveling abroad is something important. I hope Drew does it. I hope my other two kids do it.
Well, I mean, you know, half your business is not in the United States. And whether you go to one country, I mean, opening yourself up to different cultures and being able to adapt. I mean, when you look at somebody that's going to help you build your business, it's got to be a plus.
Absolutely.
You know, that if they've dealt with other cultures, because, I mean, even in the U.S., and you got other cultures right here you have to deal with your customers. It's amazing. But learning in a different language just kind of.
And I think, saying, learning a different language, I think that's why Holy Cross really does emphasize the full year abroad, not just for the English language speaking countries, but for those foreign language speaking countries, because it's really going to take you that first semester to feel confident enough in a language to speak it every day and speak it comfortably. And then it's really going to take a second semester to dive into the culture, feel confident to go out and develop relationships with people. So yeah, I think that's one of the benefits of having a full year to go abroad. While it sounds extremely intimidating within the context of giving up a year at Holy Cross, I really think that you're gaining something that's unique. And for the students that choose not to go abroad or decide that's not what they want to do, then they do have that junior year experience, and it's just as strong as the other 3 years that they have on campus. And then they have to deal with the people coming back from York, England, who said, oh yeah, last year when I was abroad, or that time when I was in Paris, or that time. But it's definitely an opportunity that Holy Cross.
Well, I mean, if you go to England, it's so easy, as you know, to get around Europe.
Yeah.
What a phenomenal experience to just broaden yourself, to be able to say, yeah, I went to Paris for the weekend. Or, yeah, we hadn't been to Brussels, so we jumped over, went there, saw a bullfight in Madrid. Just very few kids are going to have that opportunity.
And something else just to mention about the program is that, you'll still graduate within 4 years at Holy Cross doing that program. You still graduate on time, your credits transfer over. And it might sound extravagant to say, going off to Paris for a weekend or going off to Barcelona for the Easter holiday, which is something I was fortunate enough to do. I worked, very hard to sort of save up that money and do. But financial aid at Holy Cross carries into your study abroad year.
Yeah.
So that's something else that, again, as we mentioned before, finances are something that, can affect a student's decision as far as college goes. For Holy Cross, you can travel abroad, and your financial aid package will follow you. So students do really have that opportunity beyond the hill.
So you're not going to be overly strained financially.
Exactly.
That junior year.
Yeah.
I have one more question in the admission process.
Yeah.
Is there some way when you make a decision, you can look at a student, and it's probably very difficult to do, but try to grasp who are the students that are going to make a difference in the world in the future? Who are the students that are really going to go out and lead and make changes? I mean, that's hard to do. I mean, there's a lot of smart kids in this world today.
Yeah.
There's a lot of applications coming in. I mean, you could basically handpick students that are 4.0 or 4.5 GPA all day long. But how do you identify those students that are really going to make a difference moving forward?
Yeah, so especially when I'm conducting interviews myself, I've had moments where I've spoken to a student, and after 5 minutes, I just can't believe how put together this student is. I think to myself, you have done things that even I have not done, having been through the college process, which is just it's amazing. So it's great to hear those stories, and that's part of the reason why I love the profession as an admissions counselor.
Yeah.
But I also think the fact that there are 13 of us helps that process, because I don't feel the weight of 1,000 worlds on my shoulders that I'm making these decisions solely, that there are other people that have more years under their belt, have seen more applications, have met more students that are qualified to be at Holy Cross. And so I can feel confident in saying, I believe the student has what it takes to succeed at Holy Cross and beyond and really, have an impact on the world. but then also open that up to 12 of my coworkers who, can agree, can disagree, can see different, angles, different perspectives. So I think that we really do have the best setup to find, like you said, those students that are gonna make the difference, that are gonna change either their current situation or change, just the global world.
So now, how many applications do you read as a primary?
So our process is it's threefold. First time your application will be seen is typically alphabetically. Second time by last name. Second time your application is seen will be broken down by different groupings, typically sometimes geography. So I'll read for Chicago, Boston, and those New York areas I mentioned. And then the third time your application is going to be seen is in front of the full committee of 13 people, 26 eyes. Your application comes up. And that's for every application that we receive.
But each step in the process, you're starting to weed.
So that's the important thing to hear sort of in that process is that nowhere along that road do I, Brandon Gomez, say, you know what, this student isn't qualified, I'm going to toss them away. All 6,000 applications, 100% of the applications we receive are seen in front of the 13 committee.
Wow.
Which is...
How many do you...
And I was just going to say, so to answer the original question, which is how many do I personally read, anywhere between 500 to 600.
So out of those 600, how many do you look at and say, yeah, I think, when I met Drew and Jeff, I said, this is a family that's purple.
Right.
Everything about it feels right. How many out of 600 do you walk away with saying, I'm going to stand up in front of the other 12 and say, this one should be purple?
Yeah. So that strongly, to feel that strongly and to feel that confident, I sort of hold that reservation just because I do want to really get to know students and hear what other people have to say. What's nice is that when we're reading applications and when we're going through this whole process, we're basically creating a more concise reader sheet of information of all the materials that have been submitted to us. So of all those students, I would say, maybe 4 or 5 handfuls are sort of me saying, you know what, this student definitely has what it takes. There are students that fall much larger into that spectrum of discussion of, we'll have to see how it looks in the applicant pool, what students we're seeing. Because I only see 500 of the applications, there's a whole nother slew of them that I have no idea what's going to be brought in front of me. But I definitely feel, and I think that my coworkers feel, that we need to keep an open mind in terms of what we see in an application, but also pull those things out and jot those things down. We have what's called a bottom line, where we write a quick little 2-word sentence. And in mine, I might include, look at the interview write-up because it's a strong interview, or, great college essay, worth the read in front of the full committee. So that's sort of just the process that I go through when I'm reading it. And I mean, there are those students that you say, you know what, this student is probably going to, have a great shot. But at the end of the day, it's the full 13 that have to agree with me.
Do you ever not accept someone because you believe that they're going to choose Boston College or an Ivy League school over Holy Cross?
So I think that if a student, is qualified to get into Holy Cross, we're going to accept them, regardless of if they have, eager, enthusiastic alumni parents that both went to BC. Or some other, college, because ultimately the student's going to make the decision. So we really like to see that. And again, like I said, I keep saying over and over again, demonstrated interest is really the way that we see a student's want to come to Holy Cross.
So parents should start early. Don't wait till the middle of your senior year, because you'll never catch up.
Yeah, and I mean, I always start my information sessions with, I always like to know who I'm talking to. Juniors or seniors, juniors, who's in the room. Sophomores, you'll sometimes get those hands to shoot up. Freshmen, I always ask that. People laugh, but freshmen show up. They really want to get on that process, or it's a younger sibling of a student who is a junior or senior looking at the college process. But I think that the trend typically is for students to start junior year. And that's when we really start to interact with them more, sending them materials, things to look at Holy Cross when they should tour. We offer interviews for only seniors. So if you're a current senior, you can interview at Holy Cross. And that's really when the application process is starting, that fall of senior year. But, by then you should really have your list and ask yourself those first questions, big, small, far, near, private, state, things like that.
Interesting. So as we start winding down, if you were to want to leave an ending thought with parents who are thinking about sending their kids to school, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I would encourage parents to allow the student to explore what their options are that are out there. I myself am a student that's first gen, so meaning I'm the first in my family to go to college. I had absolutely no idea what was out there, what was an option for me, and where I want it to be. So for me, it was a clean slate. No influence from any outsiders. It's nice to sort of, promote a school to a student, but ultimately, the student needs to know and have guidance counselors interact with them. I always say to students, don't be afraid to let mom and dad read your essay, but you also read your essay. Have your guidance counselor read your essay, because these are different perspectives. Just for students to be open-minded, to look at different schools and then sort of hone in on that process, make that Excel spreadsheet of what I'm looking for in a college. And for parents, stay involved in the process and obviously, like we've talked about, it very much is a parents and student process. But at the end of the interview, the business card that I hand out, goes to the student, because they're the ones that are going to be emailing back and forth with me or interacting with me. We like to see that independence, but I'm not even going to go far as to say a helicopter parent, because I think, again, parents should be involved, but allowing the student to really, make their decisions as to what they want.
Well, I can say that as a parent, I absolutely love the fact that I was included.
Yeah.
In all the different pieces. Even if it was only 10 minutes, I got my kid fix.
Right.
I got to see Emily, I got my kid fix.
Right.
And then she went off and did her thing. But it brought us closer as a family. And we still do the tailgates, like you say, with other alumni and parents of alumni. And we still go up together on all the football games.
Right.
And hopefully we'll see you in a purple tie someday. Thank you all for coming.
Of course. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Al.
Thank you.
Thank you
And
very
as
much.
always,
of course.
get to know what you're deciding on. Help your child. It's going to be your son or daughter's decision, but it is a life-changing event that can be so rewarding if you participate. Start early, and as Brandon said, the more events you go to, yes, you get points, that's good. But more importantly, you'll help your son or daughter figure out what school is best for them and how to approach it. So, as always, good night. To our 6 loyal viewers, may God bless, and may tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Yeah, of course.
Thanks, Al.
Yeah. Great.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life till